Passport Mommy with Michelle Jerson. Motherhood is both amazing and difficult at the same time. The Passport Mommy, Michelle Jerson, is here to share in your journey.
It's amazing. It really is, just watching them grow and see how much change and how much they learn just without the filters around them.
Joining you on your greatest adventure, here's Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy.
Welcome to the show. I'm Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy. And wow, so much is happening, right? Depending on where you are in the country, different things are opening up. There's a lot of controversy as to what should be open, what shouldn't be open, what should we be doing. I have my own thoughts, which we could talk about later in the show. But I am thrilled to have with me today Dr. Daliah. Dr. Daliah Wachs is a syndicated radio host on the GCN network. She is a board-certified family medicine physician, an author, a medical expert on multiple news stations, but above all, she is a wife and a mom to two great boys. Hi, Dr. Daliah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. So what is going on lately with you and your medical practice? What are your latest concerns that you've been seeing?
Excellent. Well, so, it's been really interesting because I've been doing mostly telemedicine, and we have been seeing definitely an uptick in cases of people calling with COVID. It seems milder than what I saw back in March, but we are seeing a lot of cases of people coughing, fever, body aches. And the other thing we're seeing is people are called concerned because somebody has come back to work. They've been exposed or positive to COVID, and now they have to find out if they've been exposed. So there's been kind of a lot of, it's been very uneasy. It's been very unsettling for a lot of people coming back to work. They probably thought it was going to be a breath of fresh air and would be able to finally go back to normalcy, and it's not. And I think, we're definitely in the medical field kind of feeling some of that heat because people want to go back to normal, and it's been difficult.
Right, exactly. And so what is your recommendation? Do you think we should be going back to the way we were, or do you think we should still be practicing the social distancing? Because really, yes, the curve has flattened in some states, not others. What do you think?
It's a good question because I, as a physician, have always been nervous about tuberculosis and nervous about flu and nervous about the polio-like illness we see with, that we saw with kids the last couple of years. So for me, I love the idea of, having that social distancing, making sure, kids don't share cups, making sure people aren't, using gloves and not sneezing on your food when they serve you. The problem is when it comes to infectious disease, 6 feet a lot of times doesn't cut it. And a lot of times these masks don't cut it. And so I think these measures are nice, but I don't think, again, they're going to be 100% effective because nature always wins. So I like the idea of us being more careful. I just don't know if shutting down is an answer because I think, if there's going to be a new virus with us, we need to kind of learn how to live with it.
Right, exactly. So you mentioned about gloves when serving and preparing food. So my question to you is this, because I know everybody's excited to go back to restaurants and to do the outdoor dining thing. And in the back of my mind, I've always thought, yes, but whoever's preparing your food, and even if they're wearing gloves, if they sneeze on their glove and then they touched your food, isn't that of concern, or am I overthinking it?
No, you're 100% right. It is a concern. I waited tables and, I tended bar and I served drinks when I was in medical school because I had to support myself while in medical school. And I used to, pretend to sneeze on the food, to make my customers laugh and tip me more. But it is a concern because, what if you have MRSA? What if there is, somebody with a wound and, the gloves you can't wash. It's nice if somebody's wearing gloves and might be covering up the eczema that the hand sanitizer, the repetitive hand sanitizer use could be causing. Right. But the problem is if that glove touches something in a bathroom or something and those aren't changed, they could be dirty and you don't really wash your gloves. So sometimes glove wearing might give a false sense of security. I prefer it if somebody has cuts or open wounds on their fingers, but it doesn't, necessitate the need or diminish the need to still wash hands and, not sneeze on one's food. So I think I agree with you that there might be more of a false sense of security with a lot of these measures.
Right, exactly. And I mean, personally, I know you mentioned that you were going out for your birthday the other day. So are you fine with going to restaurants and you're okay with the fact that people are still preparing food?
I've always had this nervousness because of flu season and swine flu and, MRSA and all the other things. So, for me, I've always kind of had that concern. But on the other end, I think a lot of us in the healthcare field have built up an immunity because we're constantly surrounded by it. So part of me, even though that isn't anything I would ever recommend, is part of me kind of wants to have the immunity to this. Part of me does not want to live in a bubble and wants to have some exposure so we build up our strength. But then on the other end, for those people like my mom who are older, I don't think she's ready to go out and eat. I would not recommend anybody high risk going out to eat at this point because I think the cases are spiking.
Right, exactly. And I think it's amazing to me. I've been hearing like my parents and my in-laws, they are going out more and taking more chances than we are here. And I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I feel like they're like, oh, yeah, we went to the dollar store. Yeah, we went to Target. Yeah, we went to this appointment and that appointment.
Yes. Well, what I'm seeing with the baby boomers or even the traditionalists that are older than the baby boomers is they have more of a YOLO. You only live once. And my mother is actually demanded that she got to still go to work and not work from home. She is like, look, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on this earth, and I don't want to be stuck in my house. And so I think you have a different point of view from a lot of older individuals saying, look, I want to see my grandkids. I'm not going to be away from my grandkids much, So I think that's their take. And I agree. I've been seeing people almost overly now exposed than what they would have done because they've been locked up for so long.
Right, exactly. And I know yesterday I was in New York City and I, knock on wood, have not had any symptoms since this whole thing has happened. But I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to go get the antibody test because insurance is covering it now. And we did have dinner with a family who was diagnosed with COVID a few days later. And my husband was very sick when this first started. We think it was the flu and not COVID, but I thought, let me go check. And I just couldn't believe how many people just kept rotating in and out of this urgent care clinic there for COVID testing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, now I like the idea of the antibody testing to see if you were exposed before, because a lot of people think that maybe in November or December it was in America before we were told about it. And a lot of our quote unquote flu might have been COVID. One thing I noticed with telemedicine is even though it provides an amazing service, it prevented a lot of people from going into an urgent care to get swabbed for flu. So while I was trying to tell people, I don't know if this is flu or what's going on in China, can you go get checked? They didn't want to. Like, that's why I'm calling telemedicine, so I don't have to get checked. I go, but I don't want to call this the flu unless you've been positive because this might be what's going on in China. So unfortunately, I think we lost a lot of data because people chose telemedicine rather than going in and getting seen. But, can't go back now.
Right, exactly. And I know my husband was very sick at the end of February, beginning of March, and they wouldn't even give him a COVID test. They said, unless you are absolutely sure that you have been exposed to somebody who had it. And he said, well, he was at this international toy fair in Manhattan, and he says there were tons of people there from China and all over the world, and he had just traveled back from Germany, but that wasn't enough. They weren't testing at the time.
Yep, exactly. So so we're looking at these high positivity rates and these cases rising. Well, we've also had more tests. However, now that I see in certain areas, parts of the country like Arizona, where they're running out of tests, we might start to see different rates. And so that also kind of complicates matters because if you don't have the tests, then we aren't testing, and then we don't have the data, and then we don't know how many more cases there are. So but if there is any good news for me to tell, it looks like it is weakening. It looks like even though cases are up, many of these people are not requiring ventilatory support as we've seen, earlier in the spring.
Right, exactly. So now there's schools that are talking about reopening, and I know my daughter's daycare is reopening in the middle of July, but they have all these new guidelines. What are your thoughts on them? What do you think about kids going to school and wearing masks all day? Do you think it's beneficial, not beneficial?
Well, it's interesting because, the daycare setting is going to be difficult. These kids are going to be touching their faces. The average kid, just like any animal or puppy or kitty cat, when I tried to put masks on the kitty cat and dog, to kind of make a statement, they don't, people and animals don't want things on their face. So unfortunately, I think the masks on daycare children will cause more face touching.
Yes.
And kids need to play with each other. Kids need to be in groups. And so I don't think these young kids are going to understand why they have to be a across a room from somebody else when, this is part of their development. But, my thoughts on the whole school process are a little different. I agree with a lot of these measures because flu is very dangerous, and flu kills kids more than COVID does. And so I love the idea of schools having a hybrid sort of, plan where if flu does come into play, they could at least knee jerk and have students at home if there's a deadly flu season or outbreak. Right. So I like the fact that the schools are preparing for it, but kids still need to be kids.
Right, exactly. I agree with you. And I don't know what I want to do with my daughter with sending her back, because on one hand, I do want her to be with her friends, and we've had a play date here and there. And then on the other hand, I'm a little worried, but I don't want the,
it's
current
true.
Guidelines. Definitely not going to put her in a mask all day.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's true because, I talked to a mother yesterday who said, do we know what the long-term effects are? Kids don't seem to be as affected, but what if the virus decides to hide out in an organ, like let's say the pancreas, and cause diabetes later or something? We don't know enough about the virus. We don't know. It's so new. So, we're going to in medicine say, let's, avoid exposure as much as possible. But, for kids, every month of their development is vital. And so then you start to wonder if you do more damage with the bubble sort of protection we want to do. It's really difficult. It's really conflicting for most young parents and teachers and healthcare workers right now. What do you do with a young child who's already lost a quarter of a year in development, exactly. that they would have had? Right. It's frustrating. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Dr. Daliah. She is an amazing talk radio host and a family medicine physician. I've known her for years. I just love seeing you, Dr. Daliah, pretty much every year at our annual Talkers Convention. And I want to talk to you more in the next segment because we have so much more to talk about COVID, about your new book. I want to hear everything that's going on with you. I'm Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy.
Motherhood is a journey. Joining you on your greatest adventure, here's Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy.
We are speaking with Dr. Daliah. She is a syndicated radio host on the GCN network. She's a board-certified family medicine physician, an author, a medical expert on multiple news stations, and she's a wife and a mom to 2 great boys and lots of kitty cats and doggies. How do you do it all, Dr. Daliah?
Oh, my gosh. I just love pets, and maybe it's because the kids, now the boys are teenagers, so they don't want to listen to me. So I guess every time I kind of feel like I'm losing my babies, I'll just, adopt another rescue cat or something. But it's definitely not the best smelling house on the neighborhood. Let's just say that.
Well, that's amazing. I give you a ton of credit, and it's good to know that maybe down the line when my kids get older that I may be going the pet route.
Yes.
Oh, gosh. All right. So before the break, we were talking all about COVID and about the antibody testing and kids going back to daycare. So now there's some breaking news about whether if you're coming from a certain state, that New York, New Jersey, and one other state, what was it? New York, New Jersey,
Connecticut.
And Connecticut. They don't want you coming into the state unless you've self-quarantined for 14 days before.
Exactly. Yeah. So this apparently just came down where they have now announced mandatory 14-day quarantines for people coming from certain states that are having high numbers. So if you're coming from Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Washington State, Utah, or Texas, you will be fined $2,000 if you don't do a mandatory 14-day quarantine before enjoying yourself in the city or wherever. And then $5,000 the second time. And Governor Cuomo has said they're going to fine $10,000 if they think you have caused harm, meaning possibly spread the virus. And so I don't know how this is going to be enacted. I don't know how practical this is, but I know Montana, I think, or North Dakota might have done something similar when the outbreak first started, but it looks like the states want to kind of protect their own, and they want to avoid people coming in when they're slowly starting to get a grip on their numbers. But what do you do if you have travel plans or you have family members? This is tricky.
Exactly. And I know, and again, like you said, it's one thing if you're flying in, but otherwise, how do you really keep track of people? And how do you know whether or not somebody could tell you they self-quarantine for 14 days and then, who knows? And then they go to New York, they get sick or they get somebody else sick and they say, well, I picked it up in New York. So I feel like it's really hard to monitor. I think it's great what they're trying to state. And I agree, especially with how hard New York and the neighboring states have worked over these last few months and everything we've been through.
Exactly. That's my guess. My guess is they are pretty beaten down from what they've had to do with their lockdowns, and that they want this as over as possible. And so they want to, you know how the European Union wants to block Americans from still coming so they can kind of keep their little micro environment safe. I think it's impractical, but I understand why they're trying to limit travel. The problem is again, going back to grandparents. You have grandparents that haven't seen their kids or, grandkids. And, now that things are loosening up, people who have waited 3-4 months for their wedding or for, being amongst each other, now they can't do it still. And somebody's going to have to decide, if they're going to, what they're going to put first. And it's tough. I have family members, in hospice and older individuals. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't want them getting COVID, but when do they finally get to, see family and live?
Right, exactly. And we went and did a surprise visit for my parents for my mom's birthday. And I thought we were just going to go in the backyard, sing happy birthday to her through the window and drop off a few things and leave. And we ended up having a really nice visit and it felt really good and it felt really nice to see them. But as I left there and I'm driving home and I'm listening to the Howard Stern show and he's going on and making everyone who's not wearing a mask feel incredibly guilty. And I think he's putting out a good message. But I was there and I didn't wear a mask the entire time around my parents. And I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, God forbid something happens after our visit.
I know. And, these masks, I get asked about the masks. It's tricky. We heard in Oregon, in Lincoln County, that the mask initiative or the mandate that they have in Oregon is going to be allowed to be exempt for those who are, quote unquote, non-white because they feel masks can racially profile. And so many people are kind of asking, well, if you're going to have some communities not wear a mask, you're going to have some communities that do. Does the mask even help? And the studies vary. I enjoy there being a barrier. I always wore a mask with my patients anyway because of flu. Again, I was very scared of flu, very scared of tuberculosis. I didn't want to, even though I wasn't sick, pass it to somebody else. However, many of these masks aren't worn appropriately. I can't tell you how many times I've been through the drive-thru and the person wearing the mask has it around their chin or they have their nose exposed, and then people are reusing the mask. They're not changing the masks out. They're not washing them. So masks, I think, provide a barrier, but they're not being used correctly, and they're being, it's being, determined based on race, who wears it and who doesn't. At that point, you start to kind of dilute the efficacy of them.
Right, exactly. I agree with you. And even when I was in New York yesterday and I was walking around with my mask and I hated it. It was really hot and it was the last thing I wanted to have on, but I had it on to protect myself and others. And then you see people, they just don't care. And they're in the elevator with me not wearing it. And it's really aggravating. So I feel like you have to have a standard.
Either everybody has to be on board or it just doesn't work.
Right, exactly. We're speaking with Dr. Daliah Wachs, Dr. Daliah, as she's known as. She's a syndicated radio host on the GCN network, board-certified family medicine physician. She is just so knowledgeable, but so friendly, and I'm so thrilled to finally have her on the show. So we're going to talk with her more coming up in a few. Dr. Daliah, I want to talk to you coming up about the pros and cons of hand sanitizer, because I know we've all been obsessed with it, but maybe there are actually some cons too. And now that it is more readily available, there are maybe some other options when it comes to keeping our hands clean. I'm Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy. More coming up in a few.
Passport Mommy with Michelle Jerson. Motherhood is a journey. Joining you on your greatest adventure, here's Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy.
Welcome back to the show. We're here with Dr. Daliah. She is talking to us about COVID and just everything that's going on with sending the kids back to daycare, back to school, and with these new mandates as far as not crossing state lines unless you've self-quarantined yourself for 14 days. And I think as parents, we have so many issues on our minds. Really, I think no matter what we do, we always question ourselves. That's just natural. I know I do. Do we send our kids back? Do we not? Do we get together on that play date without a mask? Is it okay? Is it not? And, I think at the end of the day, you just have to really do what you feel is best for yourself. But Dr. Daliah is here to talk to us more and to give us her perspective as someone in the medical field. Hi, Dr. Daliah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. So we were talking a little bit before the break about the efficacy of masks. And what is your take on hand sanitizer? Do you feel that it is an effective way to kill the germs?
So that's interesting. It's a good question, and I hope I'm not too lengthy in talking about this. But, for years we were cautioned to be careful with hand sanitizer because it would breed superbugs. If we sanitize everything and bugs seem to outlive that assault of the alcohol component of it, then it could breed progeny that then can withstand hand sanitizers. So, for years we told people not to overdo things. But my big problem is I have two boys, and they would come home muddy from baseball practice or football practice or whatever, and I would say wash your hands before dinner, and they would just do 2 little squirts of hand sanitizer and then sit at the table. And I'm like, no, I still see and smell the dirt. You wash your hands. And so I've always been a proponent of hand washing. Wash your hands. And hand sanitizers, unfortunately, I'm starting to see more and more risks, especially to young kids. And I'm wondering if we might need to rethink our approach with it. And so an example is, my husband went into a very, very popular store, and I don't want to say the name of the store because I don't want to, name them out, call them out. But he went up, put some hand sanitizer on himself, and it reeked of alcohol. We were talking, it smelled like a cheap bar with the cheapest alcohol that got broken in a fight, and it was all over the place. And, I asked him to show me what the bottle looked like. I then went myself, and it wasn't a typical brand bottle. It was a generic bottle, which to me means this store was creating their own sanitizer to fill up in pumps, and they were probably using alcohol. They were probably using cheap vodka to make it, because hand sanitizer is getting more expensive and it's still getting difficult to purchase. And with all these stores wanting to reopen, they had to prove that they had hand sanitizing stations. So my worry is we aren't even getting good hand sanitizer out there at a lot of these places. We might be lathering ourselves with alcohol, and I don't want kids getting alcohol on their hands. Or possibly the fact, who knows who could be spiking, who knows what products are in there. If these things are not FDA approved, many of these outside locations or restaurants or whatever having a bottle I wouldn't put it on my hands. I wouldn't trust it. People can also reuse Purell. I trust Purell with my life. I think Purell is a fantastic brand, but what if they're repurposing the bottle because they couldn't get hand sanitizer? So I worry that there's bootleg or contaminated product out there. I worry that people with very extremely sensitive skin or eczema, they put hand sanitizer, it causes them to dry, crack, get infection. And so I'm starting to just say, you know what, go to the bathroom and use soap and water, because these hand sanitizers may not be as safe as we think.
Right, exactly. Now, when you mentioned about putting alcohol on children's hands, do you feel a lot of the hand sanitizers that are true hand sanitizers are 62 to say 74% it's ethanol or ethyl alcohol?
Yes.
Is that okay for kids? Or because I had always used the hand sanitizers that did not have alcohol in it, because I felt that was not good to put on children's hands. But lately I've been using the ones with the alcohol in it.
Exactly, yes. And the reason why there's been this pendulum swing is because the isopropyl alcohol in some help fight bacteria. The ethyl alcohol helps fight viruses, and we think it could fight both. But the non-alcohol containing sanitizers may have triclosan, and the triclosan could be an endocrine disruptor. And so in my family, we were like, okay, let's stay away from the triclosan and let's just find the ones with alcohol. And a little bit every now and then I don't think is concerning. But if now every place you go into, we're being told to lather up. Your kids might be exposed to a little bit more, not to mention all the fragrances and other chemicals they put in these hand sanitizers. And I would much rather they be exposed to soap that they could wash off than something that's going to soak into the skin. And again, I'm not trying to be a, conspiracy theorist or whatever, but I just kind of wonder if we're exposing ourselves to just way too many chemicals.
Right. I agree with you. And I try to wash my kids' hands whenever I can. Obviously, there are times that we're out and we're not near a sink, and so I spray their hands with it. But I'm always wondering, and I think it's a good point. Now, talking about children and all the questions that we have as parents, you have a new book coming out called The Art of the Boo-Boo. I love that.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I'm not very creative. Most of my books are medical student guides and, medical Spanish for the healthcare professional. But this was fun because me and a group of young doctors who had just graduated medical school decided to make very easy to read bite-sized chapters on what to do if your kid has a fever or a tummy ache or diarrhea or being bullied or their first period. And we realized that because none of us really speak, very, very, high legal terms, and we don't like to speak in medical terms that are multisyllabic, we like the idea of bite-sized information that parents, caregivers, teachers can handle. So we wrote The Art of the Boo-Boo because taking care of a boo-boo, whether it's an inside boo-boo or outside boo-boo, is an art. And so that's our book, and it's on Amazon, and I'm really proud of it. Of all my books, this one I really, really like, and it's fun. And my boys wrote a few of the chapters as well on the orthopedic issues and what your first aid kit could be. So I was able to do this with my kids. So my kids, wrote some of the chapters of the book as well. So I'm really, I love this. This was like a family endeavor.
Oh, that's so great. I know I was looking at the authors on it, and when I saw the other people on there with your same name, I was like, oh, I wonder if those are her kids. That's so great.
Yep, Stone and Brock are my little cupcake tushies. They don't like me calling, anybody that, letting them know that I call them cupcake tushies. But, we're all moms here, so they're my little cupcake tushies. And and they look, if they're sitting around the house, in lockdown, playing video games, I'm like, do you want to do something good for people? And they did. I mean, they didn't even hesitate. And so we're gonna come up with another book on germs and things like that, because I think having that teenage perspective also kind of helps make it a little bit more real. And teenagers babysit, so this is also a good babysitting guide as well.
That's absolutely right. And I think that those are things that parents would find really helpful to leave out for the babysitter and say, hey, check this out if something comes up. Obviously, call me, but here's something that you can do. And bite size is perfect because we all know we have no time to actually read a book. So
Exactly. I'm not very good. Yeah, the book is under 100 pages and the chapters are like a page or two at most, because we wanted easy reference and, just something, and again, it's, reading it before you have a child or before the issue happens allows you to kind of be a little bit more calm. It's interesting. I get patients that call me all the time going, well, I guess I have to go to the hospital. Where do I go? Where does my insurance cover me? And I'm like, always figure out where you go before the emergency. Know which hospital your insurance covers. Because then there's a calm, and you know exactly what to do if God forbid, just like when we have to give birth, we already know where we're going. We have our bag packed and, we know who to call and, what to post on social media. We have it all planned out.
Exactly. And I agree with you. And thank goodness for that. And it is amazing how much preparation we do before giving birth versus, like you said, something like this. So definitely something good to keep in the pocket, especially if you're traveling, because I don't know about you, but I find that my kids get sick. They could be healthy for months and months. We decide to finally go on a trip and they're sick. Something major is going on that trip.
Exactly. And one thing we tried to highlight in The Art of the Boo-Boo was, when do you have to see a doctor and when is this something you could stay home for? Like the COVID rash, trying this back to COVID. Parents were calling me freaked out that their kid would have a rash. And they were like, is this the COVID rash? What do we do? And it turned out it might have been ringworm, or it might have been, a little eczema. And so, we don't want to ever prevent somebody from going to a doctor that or a medical provider, but sometimes there are certain questions that could put you at ease, so when you need to go to an ER versus an urgent care, or when you could kind of watch it at home.
Right, exactly. So you mentioned the COVID rash. I'm not familiar with that. What exactly does a COVID rash look like? Not to freak parents out even more, but just to give them knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Knowledge calms us down. Yeah. So this COVID rash came out a couple months ago where we heard that kids who didn't have any symptoms would have funny looking toes. Their toes would look bruised, or they would look a little frostbite. But the kids were fine. They were giggling and their toes still were tickly, and we kiss the toes and do this little piggy. But the moms are like, but the toes look funny. The toes have a red look to it. And so this COVID rash we think is something similar to what we would call a vasculitis, which is an inflammation of the blood vessels, where the children might not have the breathing issues or shortness of breath, but the virus does cause some inflammation. And what's been unfortunate is some of these severe cases in kids who got COVID, very rare, many of them had this type of rash. And so it's one of the different rashes, because when you press on the rash, it doesn't blanch and go light. It still stays dark no matter what you press on it. And so those are non-blanching rashes. And those are the types of rashes where I would make sure you check in with a medical provider.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Yeah. My son had some mystery thing on his butt recently, but I don't think. And I was like, where did this come from? And what is this? But I don't believe it was a COVID rash.
I've seen my kids, they will sit on anything. I thought it was like a bad diaper rash or yeast, because sometimes yeast won't blanch and, these diaper rashes get really bad. And I'm like, right. What did you sit on? And he probably sat on like an ant farm or something. And I'm like, you got stuff all over your tushy. And they thought it was funny, but, yeah.
I know. And I have to say, maybe as a mom of two boys, you can help me out with this. So today I took my daughter and my son, 1 and 3, out to play. And immediately my daughter went right to the big pile of dirt and started just like digging her nails in. And then my son went in and started rolling in it and throwing it. And then he rolled down a hill and he got all the dirt in his mouth. And as a mom, I'm like, oh God, I don't want to clean this when we get home. I'm like, oh God, I don't want this dirt in your mouth. But then the other part of me is saying, well, this is supposed to be good for them. I should let them do this.
Yeah, it's crazy because, if it's a campground, I would say no because of hantavirus and all the weird stuff, because you don't want them to get animal droppings in them. But kids, and I don't like dust and kids breathing in the dust. So there's obviously an argument to not let them play in the dirt. But here's the thing. It's the development. Kids want to touch nature. Kids, just like puppies, want to dig in dirt. They want to dig holes. They want to build and destroy. They want to make sandcastles, and then they want to fall against it and let it all. That's what kids do. And them learning how to build and then destroy teaches them how to, again, build again. And so it's interesting how kids want to do that. So I let my kids play, but the second I thought it was going to be an inconvenience for me, that's when I stopped them. So if I thought bath time was going to take longer than 2 minutes, I was like, okay, now we're done. So I leave it up to you. You use your instinct. But yeah, I don't like kids, but putting dirt in their mouth. Will they get dirt in their mouth? Man, when I was younger, we used to play with thermometers. The thermometer would break, and we would have silver mercury dripping out of our mouths. And thank God we were all okay. But rule of thumb is tell kids to keep things out of their mouths, and that I think is something that we could be pretty judicious about. But rolling around in the grass and things like that, it's just a part of development.
Yeah. No, you put me at ease. But you know what? But now I don't feel so guilty either when I think this is going to be a really long bath. I don't want this. At least I don't feel like I'm cutting off their development by saying no.
Exactly. When Game of Thrones would come on and it was going to be Sunday night at 6 p.m. on my neck of the country, I'm like, okay, no. Okay, everything stops. Stops. Bedtime.
Yep, exactly. Dr. Daliah, if nothing, you've provided so much information today, but if nothing else, you have provided moms a little bit of removal of the guilt for wanting for wanting our time and for wanting to not spend an hour on bath. We are talking with Dr. Daliah. She is a syndicated radio host in her own right. She has an amazing show to check out on the GCN network. Dr. Daliah, we're going to break real quick, but how can people find you to listen to your show?
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Well, they could go to my website at drdaliah.com, DRDALIAH.com. They could go to GCN Live. We have affiliates throughout the country. I'm not sure if the list is updated because that always changes. And then they could go to GCNLive.com or iHeartRadio podcast all my shows.
Awesome. All right. We're speaking with Dr. Daliah. We have one more segment coming up. So we are going to fire off some really quick questions and just have a discussion on the last few minutes. And then, of course, I'll have you on again soon. I'm Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy.
Motherhood is a journey. Joining you on your greatest adventure, here's Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy.
We've been speaking with Dr. Daliah. We've been talking about COVID and so many other great topics. She covers everything on her show. She is a medical physician, so you get the health and wellness topics. You also get any type of lifestyle topic, anything that's going on in the news. Check her show out on the GCN network or on iHeartRadio. They stream her podcasts, or you can go to her website. So many ways to listen to her show. She also has a new book out called The Art of the Boo-Boo, which I think is great. It's little bite-sized nuggets that you could take when you're trying to figure out what's wrong with your child or what you should do in certain situations. Dr. Daliah, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is so much fun.
Sure. So we were talking during the break about, the fact that many of us have been home with our significant other for months on end now, and both people could be working from home. And that could definitely put a wrench in a lot of people's marriages. I feel like, we'll see a lot of babies 9 months from now. We'll also see a lot of divorces after all this is done. But what if you actually have that reprieve during the day and you and your partner decide, hey, maybe we have time for a little break. The kids are napping, the kids are outside playing, but then they come back inside. Then what? What do you tell parents who are like, oh my gosh, my kids, they caught us?
It's interesting because I think many of us cringe when we remember walking in on our parents, and it seems to happen to almost everybody. And we all the time ubiquitously handle it wrong because you yell at the kid, get out, you're not supposed to be here. So not only is the kid traumatized by what they saw, now they feel like they did something wrong. So the first thing I tell parents is first, parents will then try to console their child and say, you know what, mommy and daddy were just having a conversation. And then the kids are like, wait a second, now everything you taught me about, conversation and communication skills is wrong. So the first thing you want to do is you want to assure the kid that they did nothing wrong. Let them know that it was your fault that the door was unlocked. It wasn't them, because they're going to be crying. They're going to feel traumatized. Tell them it wasn't them. It was mommy and daddy. Mommy and daddy were having mommy and daddy time. And the child is going to be kind of looking at what they just saw as they won't understand that it was sex. They'll kind of wonder that, mommy and daddy were doing something that doesn't look like something they want to do because kids want to mimic parents. So what's the child thinking when they saw this? The child's thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to have to do that. And you have to let them know this isn't anything that child is going to ever have to do. This was something that mommy and daddy were doing that has, understand their point of view. And then also don't generalize because, again, children are going to think this is something that, adults do, and they might never want to become an adult. But then call it mommy and daddy time and set boundaries. Set boundaries saying, look, if our door is closed, knock first, and the kid's always going to ask, well, what if there's a fire? It's like, well, then that's fine. If there's a fire, yes, you could come in. But, knock first, set boundaries, and also realize that you don't have to fix it all right away. Everybody thinks they have to fix it within the first 30 seconds of it happening. And no, sometimes it might take weeks to kind of bring the subject back up and, have a big boy, big girl talk. These kids love big boy, big girl talks, and say, look, now we're going to, talk about something that's kind of big boy, big girl and, something about grownups. Do you want to have a kind of a grown-up talk? And that's a nice way to start leading into saying, look, this is something, this happens. So, it makes people kind of cringe and go, oh gosh, but it happens. And, we need to be prepared and it's a lot easier to address than many of us make it.
Right. Exactly. I would just be like, listen, this is why you're here. Okay. Leave it at that.
Right. Exactly. Yes. That too.
But yeah, it's funny. I don't think I ever walked in on my parents, but I always thought about like, what would it be like if I did? And I always like had these visions of like, I don't know, my mom being like, stop, get out of here. Like to my dad, like, I don't want to do that. Like, it was just so weird. It was just such a weird like image.
It is. It's where I remember, and it was, I mean, oh my gosh. And, what they were trying to tell me they were doing, and I didn't realize it at first because, again, I was kind of traumatized, but then I was like, oh my gosh. And then now when you think about it, you were like, you know what, for my parents seeming to be very prude and very square, they were pretty hip, come to think of it, and then you're like, oh no, especially when they were kind of in a position that you've never done, now you start to worry about, wait a second, am I doing my marriage wrong?
Right.
Yeah, you start to rethink all of that.
Exactly. That's really funny. Dr. Daliah, we have 30 seconds left. Tell everybody again, where can they find you to listen to your show and to get your new book?
Oh, thank you. You can go to Amazon.com. It's called The Art of the Boo-Boo. You could go to drdaliah.com, my website, or Twitter, Dr. Daliah, Facebook, Dr. Daliah, and my show is on GCN Network or iHeartRadio. And thank you for having me, Michelle. This was so much fun.
It really was. Thank you for being here. I look forward to talking to you again really soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and thank you for being there for all of us. I'm Michelle Jerson, the Passport Mommy. Enjoy the rest of your day.